Okay, well, hello everybody. Um, it's been a while since I've done one of these little fireside chats, as I've called them before. But so the title here: investigating morphology and etymology, spelling structure, and history reveal meaningful relationship. Understanding the difference between what is current English spelling structure and one in historical just can't be overemphasized. You'll hear many people in the community talk about the difference between synchronic etymology and diachronic, and these are things that we have to get our head around. So um, there's a little subtitle here, accepting the scientific responsibility of understanding how morphological and etymological families work. That's kind of what this little piece is about. So, as I say, the word responsibility is going to star in this particular story. But first, I was going to go at responsibility, but as is often the case, it could be useful to go to an entirely different family and try and get our head around some of the basic principles here. So in this case, I'm going to take a look at these words mean, median, and mode. Now, the reason this came out is because when I was at the Nueva School as a visiting scholar for 2015, 2016, a neat combination of things came up. One math class, I think it was in a middle school, or maybe I can't remember, but they were asking me to look at the words mean, median, and mode. And around the same time, I think it was a grade 2 or 3 class, where in their social emotional learning unit, we're looking at what a mediator is. And also the grade 1 class was looking at medieval times. And ironically, all of these investigations had a good connection to take a look at. So let's take first a look at this word median. Now, many of you will be familiar with this chart that I often use, and you'll see different versions of it with work from Lex and Real Spelling, but it's the same 4 questions that are always a useful way to start and follow through an investigation. So we start with the idea of what does it mean, and when we started this conversation with the math class, because something about a middle number, okay, and then we might look at how is it built. Now it turns out I was able to analyze this word with an MEDI base and AN suffix. You might wonder how I did that. Well, one part of that story is finding that MEDI base building other related words that all turned out to have this idea of between, middle. And if we look a bit here, we see that there's our friend median with this MEDI base and AN, but if I put immediate, I can also build, and there's our friend mediator. So you can see that we have evidence of this base building many words, but there's another part of the story that we need to know, and that is I needed to go into the etymology. So the matrix is only about synchronic information, about current English structure. So each of these elements are used in current English. Now we have an interesting suffix here that's actually a Latin suffix, which is important to distinguish, but we can still work with it in this way. But what we see is that to be in this matrix, we have to share this Latin root, medius, middle between. And when we do that, it turns out we can get some help with this word mean. That was another word that we were looking at in math. So like the average mean, not a mean to you mean. Why can't I put mean in this matrix? Well, there's nothing I could add to MEAN and get to median or MEDI or anything. Turns out to be from the same root. So if I looked in Etymon I looked at the word or any etymological reference, I would find, if I looked up mean, it also goes back to this Latin medius for middle between, just as do all the words in this matrix. And it turns out, so does the word middle and meridian, and even the French word milieu that we use in English actually a lot, but it's actually a French word. And the fact that it's French doesn't mean it's still in the same etymological family. It still shares this root. So we can find that words can share a common root, but have different bases. Once I've identified a root, I can go over to Etymon. So here was our word median. And when I looked at that, I found, see median, the adjective, which is right here, Latin from the middle, from medius, in the middle. And I could keep going, but there's the root that I did find. And if I paste that in here, look at the words. There was my milieu. That's how I found it. And medium is there. And these are words that are etymologically related. When I'm doing this work, Etymonline can help me find which words share a root, but I have to do the word sums to find out which ones share the base. And then let's take a look. We've got our median, and we've got our a mean for an average number in the same family, something to do with middle. But what about this word mode? Well, if we think about these words mean, median, and mode, we start to notice a difference. The median literally is the middle number when you arrange data from lowest to highest. The mean is literally the line that goes through the middle of the data, but mode has nothing to do with middle. It's the one that happens most. So when we teach kids mean, median, mode, we're signaling something very strange, as if they're all related when they're actually quite different. And that we can also see in the history, because MODE, that base from the Latin modus, for measure, extent, quantity, it is an entirely different etymological family. I am often using this oval to signal members of an etymological family. And to be in a morphological family can be represented in a matrix. And that matrix fits in the oval, because to be in this matrix, you must share the root. But you could be not in the matrix, but in the same root. But mode isn't related in any way. It has to do about most, nothing to do with middle. Now, there's a story on this that I can't resist telling, that you can learn more about if you'd like to by going to a WordWorks newsletter. When this story happened at Nueva, it was actually a grade 1 class that said, hey, we're doing medieval times, Middle Ages. Could you investigate the word medieval? But once I looked at this, I studied this matrix, and I found this one, MEDI, with an EVE base, which I learned has to do with age. I ended up introducing this matrix to this the grade 1 class, sorry. And when I got to here, they knew about actually a number of these words. We talked about them. But when we got to this, and I told them that EVE meant age, one of the kids shouted out, Middle Ages. And they were absolutely right. Now, I didn't know how much those kids really internalized of all of this, but we had a great conversation about Middle Ages and medieval, and we made word sums and all that. Later on, one of the students' moms sent me an email with this picture, and what she told me in the email was that her kid had come home and gave them an entire lesson on this word medieval, and you could see how many times she wrote out this word just for fun at home. You see, you're talking about words, writing out words like play and playing, because she was teaching them about morphological structure with other words that they've done. So if you're interested in following that story, if you go to Real Spellers and you look for the newsletters, you can find number 81, A Year at Nueva, right here. And that's where you will find that medieval story in more detail. So anyways, so we've got this idea that we can use this oval to represent etymological relatives. We can have a group of words that share a base within that, and that makes a morphological family. But we can also have etymological relatives that share a root, but not a base. Of course, I mentioned that one of the groups was looking at the word mediator, and we talked about how a mediator is somebody, if you have a conflict, you must have at least two parties that aren't getting along in some way. The mediator goes into the middle, doesn't take sides, and tries to help bring the two together. So that's just the background to make sure we understand etymological, morphological families before we dive into this word responsibility. Now, years ago at a school at Wesley College in Melbourne, a teacher friend of mine asked me to take on the word responsibility. Now, I wanted to give it a context, so I just Googled I Googled responsibility, and something called Selasi's speech on responsibility came up. I didn't know who Selassie was at the time, but I found out by this investigation that he turned out to be a fascinating man. I think he was a king in Ethiopia, and he turns out to be the beginner, the person who founded the religion of Rastafarianism. The other message here is that the idea of linking whatever your investigation of a word is should be in a context. And so let's see if we can understand what Selassie's message is better by diving into one of the key words here. Again, when we're trying to investigate a word, it's good to remind ourselves that we have to talk about what does it mean first. So in a class or something, we'd get kids to share ideas of what they're thinking on that line. And then we can look at questions like, how is it built? Notice I use this small chart a lot because I'm familiar with all of this, but I recommend this isn't a bad chart to have it handy so when you're stuck on a question, you can remind yourself of places to go. So we've talked a little bit about responsibility. It's like something you're responsible for somebody else, that kind of stuff comes up. Okay, well, we could start thinking about how it's built. Now, this idea of response and responsible seems like it might be related. That comes up a lot. And then what's likely to happen on this investigation is somebody is likely to suggest that responsible plus ity could build responsibility. So I like to put sometimes an initial question mark to show that I'm just working this out. I don't know if it's true or not. So I see I have a vowel suffix. So if I did have a vowel suffix, then I would replace that E. And so I would get, if I spell it out carefully, responsible, no eity. And if you're looking closely, you should notice something. That is just not how you spell responsibility. And the problem is there's no I there. So look, if we take a look at the spelling, it just isn't the same. So what often happens now is people are tempted to, well, of course it's really related. And so they'll just ignore the evidence for the word sum. And that is a problem because we're doing science, and the word sum is how you analyze the word sum is a gift. It tells you when you've made a mistake. You need to learn to reject our hypotheses, which is great. What if we just say, well, I know how to spell responsibility. I like either this idea of response, but I don't know how to analyze this part yet. So I'll just leave it like that. But when you spell out response, if I ask a kid to do it, often it'll be RE, and there'll be a little pause, RESPONSE. And if you notice that, maybe there's an RE prefix. Okay, so we're going down this track, and we're not quite sure what we've got, but we've got a couple of hypotheses here. But this issue of this IBILITY, people are very hesitant to accept this as a suffix, and well, because it's so long, well, there's no rule about how long or short a suffix must be, so that's not really a scientific reason, but we can try to analyze it. But I've noticed that we can add IBILITY in other words, like flexibility. So we do have evidence that this is possible. So this IBILITY, either it's a suffix, or just perhaps it's a suffixal construction. And that is just, let's see what this suffixal construction is by picking another one. You all are probably familiar with the word designation, and I'm sure you know the word design. Many times people might think ATION is a suffix of designation, and it turns out we can add ATION to lots of things. And that's not false, but if we actually analyze it, we can go deeper and find that it'll always be an ATE plus ION. We can see that we have design, and designate is something that could build designation. So we can see this ATE must be here. And so what we have here is, even though my Oxford calls ATION a suffix, it's not actually a suffix. You could think of it as suffixal construction. It's at least two suffixes combined that acts like a suffix. It's just not complete, or it's not completely analyzed. And let's take a look at the word that it suggests, hesitation. Well, what if we take hesitate, which has got to be what builds hesitation? If we try, to build this word sum, look what happens. We get HESITAT, and we've got to replace that E because we've got a vowel suffix that we're adding, ATION. And that is clearly not the spelling of hesitation. So what's going on? Well, we get rid of that hypothesis, and then we realize, this is not an ATEION, it's an ATE plus an ION. And now that suffix movement, I can see hesitate hiding under there. And how do I know that HESIT is the base? Well, I can replace that ATE with an ANT and get hesitant. So I've got evidence here. We're okay if we haven't got to the deepest analysis, as long as we don't have a false analysis. So let's come back from that tangent. Now we're back here. We don't know if IBILITY. I've actually encountered some evidence recently that it may well be analyzable, but I'm not totally confident in that yet. So I'm letting IBILITY be a suffix in and of itself, because a scientist never goes deeper than they can prove. And what we do want to avoid is making a false analysis. Incomplete analysis, no problem. Invitation for later learning. So here I am. I have these two ideas, but one problem I have now is SPONSE really a base? Or is response the base? Again, it looks so tempting, but I don't want to go deeper than I can prove. So does it build some other words? And what would it mean anyways? Well, one place we could go is the word searcher. And when I go there, if I type in SPONSE, look what I get. Move this out of the way. I only get 2 words, but that's because I have to be smarter than the machine. Vowel suffixes would replace that. And then I got these hits. Now I'm going to take you back here, because notice what happened. So there's my 18 matches. The first word I saw was sponsor, which when I first did this in Melbourne, it never occurred to me. And I thought sponsor was going to be a useful false hit, but I analyzed it and it looked possible. All of these actually did work. And I could make a matrix, but I'm still wondering, what does SPONSE mean? Where do I go when I see this question? And I'm reminded by this relatives question to check etymological relations and use Etymonline. So we do that back here, and I'm going to write responsibility, RESPONS, no EIBILITY. Okay. And I see this. Now pay close attention here, because check this out. People will be so tempted to think that that is a word sum, but it is not a word sum. This is Etymonline. It's not Morphonline. He's not telling us a word sum. And there's a very important cue here that is not a word sum. You never have a dash in a word sum. What he's telling us is he's talking only about the etymology of responsibility. And he's telling us that word has if you want to find etymological information about this word, you can find etymology about responsible and the ITY suffix that apparently is related to what we are thinking now as the IBILITY suffix, but there's an etymological connection. He's not saying anything about morphology. But so this means I got to go check out responsible, which makes sense. And I come here. Now what I've done is I've pasted this information into my keynote so we can kind of take a closer look. We've got responsible. We see circa 1300, from Latin responsum, an answer, makes sense. Noun, use of neuter past participle respondere, to respond. Now it tells me see respond. Okay, so I see respond, and I click there to see what I get. And when I get here, again, we have circa 1300, from Old French, respondere, to respond, correspond. From Latin, respondere, respond, answer to promise in return. From the RE, sense, giving the sense of back. I could look at the etymology of that prefix if I wanted. And spondere, to pledge. Now, we could see spondee to get more etymological information, which would be an important thing to do, but for the moment, I'm going to pause there. We've got to remind ourselves of our question, but we found the root of responsibility, which is spondere, to pledge. So let's remind ourselves of what we're doing. The hypothesis we're investigating with the structured meaning test is this. the words sponsor and responsibly share a bound base SPONSE. I'm calling that a bound base because I don't know of a word SPONSE. If it's a base, we need to find evidence that we can prove that SPONSE builds sponsor and responsibility. Now, we did the structure test because both could be analyzed with the word sum showing this base. So we had SPONSE plus OR, and that built sponsor. We had RE plus SPONSE plus IBILITY, and that builds responsibility, and the suffixing changes apply. Now what we need to do is the meaning test. Do sponsor and responsibility share a common etymological root? Well, this is where this is a meaning test because we find the orthographic denotation of a morphological family is found in the underlying meaning of the base that we trace back to the etymological root. So when I was back here in our family, our morphological and etymological families, this base has the orthographic denotation between middle, which we get from the root. But all of the words in this matrix have an echo of that underlying meaning, as do the words in the oval. But MODE does not because it's not from the same family. So just to remind ourselves of where we are at there, we're looking for this orthographic denotation in the root. So we go to, from etym our first piece of evidence is that a root of response and responsibility is the Latin spondere for pledge, solemn, promise. And let's see what we do from there. So the question is, does sponsor share this root? Because if it does, not only have we passed the meaning test, the structure test, with the word sums, we would have passed the meaning test if they both share that root. So we have, here's our respond entry from etym. And just to go through here, notice spondere in Latin way back then meant to pledge, but notice that respondere was a Latin that is an earlier relative of respond. It also had to carry the sense of respond, answer, to promise and return. And then we've gone farther back to this spondere for pledge. Now we go to sponsor in etym, and we find 1650s. Look, it's quite a bit younger. From late Latin sponsor, I don't know how to say that. Sponsor in baptism, in Latin, a surety, a guarantee, a bondsman. From sponsus, which is the past participle of spondere, and now we've got it. This idea of give assurance, promise solemnly is being carried by this root, but the key thing we see, both respond and sponsor share a root. So this Latin root, spondere sponsus, and I'm taking from what I've read in here to come up with this notion of that the denotation includes the pledge or solemn promise. So you can see how I'm going from the etymologic information to my own interpretation. And this is something that we'll come back to a little bit later, but sponsus being the past participle of spondere is something that is good to take note of. So now we can go back and look at this oval idea that here we have a Latin root. We've identified any word that's going to go in this oval must go back to that root. Well, we made this matrix from SPONSE, and it has sponsor and it has responsibility, and it could make responsible. Now this IBILITY, I'm treating like a suffix. Maybe it's a suffixal construction, but no harm in not going to the as deep as it might go. But I don't want to analyze deeper than I can prove. And we've added some other words, sponsorship and all these ideas. But you'll notice we could also go to this, use etym, use this root and search for more relatives. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take this spondere, and I'm going to go back to etym, and now I'm going to paste the root of this family and see the words that I find. And look what I find. I find despondence, respond, espouse. There's this spondee that I'd like to come back to, and spouse. Okay, well, that let me add some family members here. a lot of these words some of the words were already here, but I can't put espouse or spouse in here because it doesn't share the base. Despondence, respond, spondee doesn't help me get there. But if I want to get more words, I might go to the word searcher and put in spond, because I'm noticing despondence, respond, and spondee, they seem maybe, and I don't know enough about this word, like I'm sensing another possible matrix. So I go to my word searcher, I type in spond, and I get a pile of useful words to investigate. Now I can take from that set of words, and now I add some more. And since I've got so many with spond, I can do my word sums. Again, they're in the same etymological family. I have to double check that in Etymonline, but these all do share this root. And now I get to have a second matrix. So spond and sponsE both are bases that grew from the same root. Now it looks like I might have a third matrix available here, but I'm going to just leave them like that. I've left spondee out here because I know there's a double E suffix, but I'd have to look at this word before I knew if that really is the structure. But I don't need to check everything right now, but until I'm confident, I'll put it there. And now we see that all of these words have at their root, this idea of a pledge, a solemn promise. And now we come back to the Selassie speech. So when we say it is both the duty and responsibility of the world's fortunate few to help fulfill the legitimate aspirations of the unfortunate many, we're saying it should be a solemn pledge or promise for those with to help those without. And which I think is a really lovely notion. And we know about the word sponsor now, and all these other words that we've encountered. So we get to deepen understanding of Selassie speech by diving into this. We've encountered this idea of a suffixal construction. We've encountered all sorts of other things, and we have further questions. But there's another question that's going to be on people's minds. And that is this nature of the relationship between respond and response. They seem like particularly close, don't they? Well, I know that a lot of people in this community are already saying, well, why isn't Pete talking about Latdic and these two principal parts? Well, that's a story that you're going to learn for another time. There is a special relationship here. And if you go on to my website and you slide down to the key links, you will see Latdict, which is a place we could use to investigate twin bases. This image was taken from Latdict. If you know about twin bases, awesome. If you don't, you're sparked to maybe learn a bit about that. And so when we come back to the final piece here, this idea of accepting the scientific responsibility of understanding how morphological and etymological families work. Well, if you accept that responsibility, it's like a solemn pledge or promise that we must not confuse bases and roots and what's historical, what's current, diachronic, synchronic. These are all stories that you can revisit. Remember when we ask these 4 questions about whatever word you come at, you're going to hypothesize what it means. You can take a look. There's no order whether you look at its word sum or etymological relatives first, but they go back and forth between these, and then we can deal with the phonology, which is really crucial, but not until after we've understood the morphological and etymological relatives. Is that going to be safe? So I hope that this little investigation helps you be more comfortable with doing your own investigations and coming to your own conclusions. Thanks.